As a traveler and explorer, I have always been drawn to the wild corners of the earth, seeking solace in nature's untouched beauty. From the serene lakes of the Pacific Northwest to the rugged mountains of Colorado, each destination offered a unique adventure and an opportunity for self-discovery. However, my journey into the Apache National Forest in Arizona would become a haunting tale of terror, one that would forever alter my perception of the wilderness. The Apache National Forest, located in the eastern part of Arizona, is a sprawling expanse of verdant pines, rolling hills, and shimmering streams. Spanning over 1.8 million acres, it is a sanctuary for wildlife and a haven for outdoor enthusiasts. The forest is named after the Apache tribes that have called this region home for centuries, their rich history and culture woven into the very fabric of the land. I had heard stories of its breathtaking landscapes and the peace it offered to those who ventured into its depths. Little did I know that the beauty of the forest would soon be overshadowed by a chilling experience I would never forget. When I first planned my trip to the Apache National Forest, I imagined days filled with hiking, exploration, and the thrill of discovering uncharted trails. Armed with my backpack, camping gear, and a sense of adventure, I set off with high hopes. The forest was known for its tranquility, and I envisioned nights spent under a canopy of stars, listening to the sounds of nature surrounding me. I brushed aside the warnings I had heard from others about venturing too far into the wilderness, convinced that my experience and preparation would keep me safe. As I arrived at the forest's entrance, the air was crisp and refreshing, filled with the earthy scent of pine needles and damp soil. The towering trees stood like sentinels, welcoming me into their realm. I felt a rush of excitement as I navigated the winding roads that cut through the dense forest, eager to reach my chosen campsite. I had read about a secluded area known for its breathtaking views and peaceful solitude, and I was determined to find it. After hours of driving and hiking, I finally arrived at the clearing I had sought. The view was stunning, showcasing a vast expanse of rolling hills and valleys bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. I set up my tent, feeling a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. With each passing moment, I became more enamored with the beauty around me, oblivious to the growing shadows that loomed in the trees. As night fell, I lit a small campfire, its flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the ground. The forest came alive with the sounds of chirping crickets and rustling leaves, a symphony of nature that filled me with peace. I settled in with a book, lost in the tranquility of the moment. But as the hours wore on, I began to notice an unsettling change in the atmosphere. The sounds of the forest grew quieter, the chirping of the crickets fading into an eerie silence that wrapped around me like a shroud. It was then that I started to feel a sense of unease, a creeping sensation that someone or something was watching me. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought as paranoia. After all, I was a seasoned traveler, familiar with the wilderness and its quirks. Yet, as I sat by the fire, the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I couldn't shake the notion that I was not alone in this vast expanse of trees and shadows. As I prepared for bed, I made sure to secure my campsite, ensuring that food and supplies were stored away from my tent. I zipped myself into my sleeping bag, hoping to find comfort in the warmth it provided. But sleep eluded me that night. The stillness of the forest was oppressive, and the sensation of being watched intensified. I lay in the darkness, straining to listen, my heart racing with every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs. The Apache National Forest, while beautiful, held secrets that I was yet to uncover. My desire for adventure had led me into a realm where nature's beauty coexisted with its darker, more sinister elements. What I would soon experience would challenge my understanding of the wilderness and force me to confront my deepest fears. In this forest, the line between serenity and terror would blur, leading me down a path I could have never anticipated. My worst mistake was yet to come, and the lessons I would learn would haunt me long after I left this place. The Apache National Forest is a vast and enchanting landscape, but its beauty conceals a myriad of stories, both human and natural. Within its sprawling pines and rocky outcrops, I began to understand the layers of history that shaped this place. The forest was not merely a backdrop for my adventure. It was a living entity steeped in cultural significance and ecological complexity. As I ventured deeper into this wilderness, I would encounter not only the haunting beauty of the land, but also the echoes of those who had come before me. The Apache tribes, whose name the forest bears, have a rich heritage that spans centuries. They have long revered the land for its resources and spiritual significance. I learned that the Apache people believed the forest was alive, filled with spirits that watched over them. This connection to the land was palpable, and as I hiked along the trails, I could almost feel the presence of those who had walked these paths long before me. Each rustle of the leaves seemed to whisper stories of survival, resilience, and reverence for nature. As I explored, I also encountered fellow travelers, each with their own motivations for being in this wild place. One evening, while sitting around a communal fire pit at a designated campsite, I met Clara, a spirited solo traveler. Her laughter was infectious, and her adventurous spirit matched my own. Clara had come to the Apache National Forest to escape the pressures of her corporate job. "I needed to find myself again," she admitted, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "There's something about being in nature that reminds you of what really matters." Our conversations flowed easily, and I was drawn to her enthusiasm for the wilderness. She shared tales of her travels through other national parks, each story revealing her deep appreciation for the natural world. I admired her courage to embark on solo journeys, something I had never fully embraced. We made plans to hike together the next day, exploring some of the more remote trails that promised breathtaking views. That night, as I lay in my tent, I felt a sense of camaraderie with Clara and the other campers. There was a warmth in the shared experience of nature that brought us together, even in the vastness of the forest. However, I also sensed an undercurrent of tension among some of the campers. A couple of individuals, who had been sitting apart, exchanged whispered conversations that seemed to carry an air of caution. I brushed it off as paranoia, attributing it to the wildness of the surroundings. The following day, Clara and I set out early, determined to make the most of our time in the Apache National Forest. As we hiked deeper into the woods, the sunlight filtered through the towering trees, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor. The air was crisp, and the sounds of nature enveloped us, birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant sound of a flowing stream. It was a moment of pure bliss, and I relished the sense of freedom that came with being immersed in the wilderness. As we trekked along the trail, Clara shared her thoughts on the importance of disconnecting from technology and reconnecting with the earth. "It's so easy to get lost in the daily grind," she said, her voice filled with passion. "But out here, you find clarity. You realize how small your problems are in the grand scheme of things." Her words resonated deeply with me, igniting a spark of introspection. I had always been driven by the hustle of life, but here, surrounded by nature, I felt a shift in my perspective. As we reached a breathtaking overlook, we paused to take in the view. The valley below stretched endlessly, a tapestry of green and brown, with the distant mountains standing guard. It was a moment that felt transcendent, a reminder of the beauty that the world has to offer. But as we stood there, captivated by the scenery, a sense of unease began to creep in. The air grew still, and the sounds of the forest faded. I exchanged a glance with Clara, and we both instinctively felt something was off. Later that evening, we returned to our campsite, our spirits high despite the strange feeling that lingered in the air. Clara set about preparing dinner, while I gathered firewood, the crackling flames providing a comforting backdrop. Yet, as night fell, the atmosphere shifted once again. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows. The earlier camaraderie among the campers began to dissolve as the whispers grew louder, a sense of apprehension settling over the group. I found myself drawn to the couple who had been speaking in hushed tones, their expressions serious and their eyes darting toward the trees. Curiosity piqued, I approached them. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to gauge their unease. They exchanged wary glances before one of them, a young man named Jason, spoke up. "We've heard stories about this forest," he said, his voice low. "Strange things happen here, disappearances, sightings, things that can't be explained." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had come to the forest seeking adventure and connection with nature, but now I was confronted with the darker side of the wilderness. The Apache National Forest, with its rich history and haunting beauty, was also a place where shadows danced just beyond the edges of the light. As I retreated to my tent that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest held secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. Secrets that would soon reveal themselves in ways I could never have imagined. The night following our conversations around the campfire was unsettling. As I lay in my tent, listening to the whispering wind and the occasional rustle of leaves, the words of Jason echoed in my mind. Stories of disappearances and strange sightings had taken root in my thoughts, weaving a tapestry of fear that clung to me like a shroud. Despite my attempts to shake off the anxiety, I could feel a growing tension among the campers, a sense that something was amiss in the Apache National Forest. The following morning, Clara and I decided to continue our exploration, eager to distract ourselves from the lingering unease. We planned to hike to a secluded lake, known for its crystal-clear waters and a sense of tranquility that promised to rejuvenate our spirits. The sun shone brightly as we set out, but an undercurrent of apprehension accompanied us. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the path became less defined, and the trees closed in around us, their gnarled branches creating a canopy that blocked out the sky. Clara, ever the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Just think of all the adventures we'll have to tell our friends about," she said cheerfully, her enthusiasm infectious. I smiled, but my heart wasn't in it. The deeper we hiked into the forest, the more I felt the weight of the stories Jason had shared. The forest seemed to pulse with an energy that was both alluring and foreboding. As we reached the lake, the beauty of the scene momentarily distracted me from my fears. The water sparkled in the sunlight, surrounded by vibrant wildflowers and towering pines. I took a deep breath, allowing the serene environment to wash over me. "This is amazing," I exclaimed, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. Clara laughed and skipped ahead, eager to dip her toes into the cool water. But as I stood there, gazing out over the lake, a strange sensation crept over me, a feeling of being watched. I turned, scanning the treeline, but saw nothing. Shaking off the discomfort, I joined Clara at the water's edge. We splashed around, laughing and enjoying the moment. However, the feeling of unease persisted in the back of my mind, a quiet whisper that refused to be ignored. After a while, we decided to take a break and sit on the rocky shore. It was during this moment of stillness that I noticed something unusual. A series of footprints led away from the water, heading into the dense underbrush. They appeared to be human, but they were larger than any footprints I had ever seen, with deep impressions that suggested a heavy weight. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Clara, look at these footprints," I said, pointing them out to her. She examined them closely, her brow furrowing with concern. "They look fresh," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think someone else is out here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. We exchanged uneasy glances, the earlier joy of our adventure fading into a shared apprehension. As we debated whether to follow the tracks or return to camp, a sudden rustle in the bushes interrupted our conversation. Clara and I froze, our hearts racing. The sound was unnerving, a reminder that we were not alone in this vast, wild place. "Maybe it's just a deer," I suggested, trying to sound brave. Yet, deep down, I knew that the forest had a way of twisting ordinary sounds into something sinister. We cautiously approached the source of the noise, curiosity battling with fear. As we drew nearer, the rustling stopped, plunging us into an uncomfortable silence. I felt sweat trickle down my back despite the cool air. "Let's just go back," Clara urged, her voice shaking slightly. I nodded in agreement, sensing that our adventure was turning into something far more alarming. As we retraced our steps back to camp, the atmosphere around us shifted. The sunlight seemed to fade, swallowed by the thickening shadows of the trees. The path we had taken felt different now, more menacing, as if the forest were closing in around us. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, half expecting to see someone, or something, watching us from the underbrush. Arriving back at camp felt like stepping into a different world. The fire pit was empty, and the other campers were nowhere to be seen. A growing sense of isolation settled over us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was somehow conspiring against us. We called out for the others, but the only response was the echo of our voices swallowed by the trees. "Where do you think everyone went?" Clara asked, her voice tinged with worry. I shrugged, trying to remain calm. "Maybe they're just off exploring another trail. It's a big forest." But even as I said it, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. The earlier camaraderie felt distant, replaced by a sense of foreboding that clung to the air like mist. As dusk approached, we decided to gather firewood and prepare for the night. I tried to push aside my fears, focusing instead on the warmth of the fire we would soon build. But as the sun set and darkness enveloped the camp, the forest transformed into a labyrinth of shadows. The comforting sounds of nature faded into silence, replaced by an eerie stillness that sent shivers down my spine. We lit the fire, its flickering flames casting long shadows that danced across the campsite. Clara and I sat close together, the warmth of the fire a small comfort against the encroaching chill of the night. We attempted to keep the atmosphere light, sharing stories and laughter, but the unease lingered, a ghostly presence just beyond the glow of our campfire. Suddenly, we heard a distant sound, a low, guttural growl that sent a wave of terror crashing over us. Clara's eyes widened, and we both turned toward the darkened tree-line, straining to see through the shadows. A moment of silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken fear. It was then that we realized the stories of the forest were no longer just tales. They were real, and we were now part of that narrative. As the night deepened, our laughter faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. The feeling of being watched intensified, and we huddled closer to the fire, the flickering flames our only defense against the darkness that surrounded us. The Apache National Forest, once a sanctuary of beauty and adventure, had transformed into a place of dread, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred with each passing moment. In that instant, I understood that we were not just explorers. We were intruders in a world that held secrets far beyond our understanding. And as the shadows closed in, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted. As the night deepened around our flickering campfire, the tension between Clara and me began to reveal itself, adding a layer of complexity to our harrowing experience in the Apache National Forest. The initial thrill of adventure had morphed into a palpable anxiety, causing us both to question our motivations for being in such a foreboding place. The fear of the unknown loomed over us, and as we huddled together, I could sense the weight of unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. For Clara, the forest had been an escape, a chance to reconnect with herself after feeling lost in the chaos of city life. Yet, as the eerie sounds surrounded us and the shadows danced menacingly, I could see the struggle within her. The very wilderness that had once promised freedom now threatened to consume her. "I thought being out here would help me find peace," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now, I feel more lost than ever." Her vulnerability struck a chord with me. I had come to the forest to seek adventure and perhaps validate my own sense of purpose. Yet, as the fear crept in, I realized I was merely trying to escape my own insecurities. The forest had become a mirror, reflecting our inner turmoil and amplifying our fears. We were both grappling with the weight of our choices, and in that shared struggle, I began to understand the depth of our connection. As the night wore on, the fire crackled, and the shadows shifted ominously. The distant growl we had heard earlier hung in the backs of our minds, a reminder that we were not alone. We attempted to distract ourselves with stories, trying to laugh off the fear that threatened to engulf us. Clara recounted tales of her childhood adventures, filled with innocence and joy, but with each passing moment, the gravity of our situation pressed down harder. "Do you think we should try to find the others?" she asked, her eyes darting to the darkened expanse beyond our campsite. The thought of venturing out into the unknown sent a chill through me. I shook my head, anxiety tightening its grip. "I think we should stay put for now. It's safer here, at least until morning." We both knew, however, that staying in one place could lead to a different kind of danger. The fear of the unknown, the creeping realization that we were isolated in an unfathomable wilderness. In the midst of our escalating fear, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere around us. The forest, which had once felt inviting, now bore an oppressive weight. The trees loomed taller, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching us. Clara's unease mirrored my own. We were both caught in a web of anxiety that was slowly tightening. As the fire began to die down, we huddled closer, the warmth slipping away with each crackling ember. Then, as if orchestrated by some unseen force, the wind picked up, howling through the trees and causing the branches to sway ominously. Clara gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling. I could feel my heart racing as I scanned the tree-line, the shadows now shifting erratically. "It's just the wind," I reassured her, though my own voice wavered. "It's just the forest settling." But deep down, I knew I was lying. The forest felt alive, and it was not welcoming us as we had hoped. In the midst of our growing dread, a flicker of light caught my eye in the distance, just beyond the trees. It was faint, almost ethereal, and for a moment, I thought it might be the other campers. "Did you see that?" I asked Clara, pointing into the darkness. She squinted, trying to focus her gaze on the strange light. "It could be another camper, or something else," she replied, her voice laced with uncertainty. The idea of investigating filled me with conflicting emotions. Part of me longed to uncover the mystery behind the light, while another part screamed for us to stay put. "Let's wait a bit longer," I said, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. But the pull to explore the unknown was strong, and I could see Clara's curiosity peaking as well. In that moment, the dynamic between us shifted. We were no longer just two travelers caught in a frightening situation. We were now partners in a quest for understanding. What if we're being watched? Clara mused, her voice low. What if that light is something we shouldn't be approaching? Her words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. The forest had a way of amplifying our fears and doubts, and I could sense that Clara was grappling with her own internal conflict. She had sought this adventure to find herself, yet here we were, facing the very real possibility of danger. I felt a surge of protectiveness toward her. No matter what happens, we'll stick together, I assured her, my voice steady. We'll figure this out as a team. Just then, the distant light flickered again, more insistently this time, as if beckoning us. The allure of the unknown tugged at my curiosity, but I was also acutely aware of the risks. The stories of strange happenings in the forest echoed in my mind, the warnings of those who had come before us now feeling all too real. The tension between our desire for adventure and the instinct for self-preservation created a complex web of emotions, each thread pulling us in different directions. As we sat in silence, the shadows deepening around us, I couldn't help but feel that the Apache National Forest was testing us in ways we hadn't anticipated. It was more than just a backdrop for our adventure. It was a living entity, rich with history and secrets. With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, and the complexities of our journey intertwined with the very essence of the forest itself. In the midst of our internal struggles and the looming threat of the unknown, I realized that our experience in the Apache National Forest was becoming a journey of self-discovery. The forest was not just a place to escape. It was a crucible that would force us to confront our deepest fears and desires. As Clara and I continued to grapple with the mysteries around us, we were approaching a turning point, one that would ultimately define our adventure and reshape our understanding of who we were. The tension in the Apache National Forest reached a breaking point as Clara and I faced the unnerving flicker of the distant light. It was a moment suspended in time, where curiosity collided with fear, and the unknown beckoned us forward. As we exchanged glances, the weight of our unspoken thoughts hung in the air. Should we investigate the light, or should we retreat into the comfort of our campsite? My heart raced, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, urging me toward the mystery that lay beyond the trees. Maybe it's just another camper, I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. They might need help. Clara hesitated, her brow furrowed with uncertainty. Or it could be something dangerous, she countered, the tremor in her voice betraying her fear. The forest, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now loomed like a predator, hiding secrets behind its ancient trees. After a moment of contemplation, I made a decision. Let's just take a quick look. We'll stay close to the campsite, and if anything feels off, we'll come back immediately. Clara's eyes widened, but I could see a flicker of determination igniting within her. Okay, she finally agreed, though her voice quivered slightly. With hesitant steps, we ventured away from the warmth of our campfire, the shadows of the trees swallowing us whole. The distant light pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding us deeper into the forest. As we walked, the sounds of the night swallowed us. A cacophony of rustling leaves and distant animal calls replaced the comfort of our earlier conversations. Each crack of a twig underfoot echoed ominously, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The light grew brighter as we approached, illuminating the underbrush with an otherworldly glow. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and dread coursing through me. Clara walked close beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in the rising tide of fear. What if it's just some kids messing around? I murmured, attempting to rationalize our decision. Clara shrugged, but I could see that she was just as apprehensive as I was. Finally, we reached a clearing where the light emanated from an unusual source, a small, flickering fire surrounded by a circle of stones. It wasn't the campfire of fellow hikers, as I had hoped. Instead, the flames danced erratically, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. But what truly sent chills down my spine was the sight of strange symbols carved into the stones, their meanings lost to me but radiating an unsettling energy. "What is this?" Clara whispered, taking a step back. Her instinctive reaction mirrored my own. "I don't know," I replied, trying to maintain a brave facade. "But we should be careful." Just as I spoke, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the flame and plunging us into darkness. The abrupt silence that followed was deafening. No rustling leaves, no distant animal calls, just an oppressive stillness. Panic surged within me. "We need to get out of here," I said urgently, grabbing Clara's arm. But before we could turn back, the air around us shifted. A low, guttural sound echoed through the trees, vibrating deep within our chests. It was a growl, primal and menacing, unlike anything I had ever heard before. My heart raced, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. We were no longer just explorers. We were intruders in a place that had its own rules. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted back the way we came, adrenaline propelling us forward. As we dashed through the darkened forest, I could feel the weight of unseen eyes on us, the shadows closing in. The path was unclear, and I stumbled over roots and underbrush, Clara's frantic footsteps echoing behind me. I dared not look back, fearing what might be pursuing us. Finally, we broke free from the dense trees and stumbled back into the clearing where our campsite lay, the flickering fire a welcome sight in the enveloping darkness. We collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. Clara looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I admitted, trying to catch my breath. The sense of safety began to return as we huddled close to the fire. But the encounter had shaken me to my core. The forest, once a place of adventure, had revealed its darker side, and I could no longer ignore the stories I had dismissed. As we sat in silence, the weight of our experience began to sink in. The Apache National Forest was not just a backdrop to our adventure. It was a living entity with its own power and mysteries. We had ventured too far into its depths, and something had taken notice. The thrill of exploration had been replaced by a deep sense of reverence for the land and its secrets. "What do we do now?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could see the fear swirling in her eyes, and I felt it echoing in my own heart. "We stay here, regroup, and figure out our next move," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "But we need to be smart about this. We can't let our curiosity lead us into danger again." The night stretched on, and though we remained close to the fire, I could sense the forest closing in around us, its shadows lurking just beyond the light. The experience had forced us to confront our fears, and in that confrontation, we had reached a turning point. The Apache National Forest had transformed from a mere destination into a powerful lesson in humility and respect. As dawn began to break, the first rays of light filtering through the trees, I realized that we had not only survived the night, but emerged changed. The forest had tested us, forcing us to confront both the external threats and the internal struggles we carried. Clara and I had formed an unbreakable bond through our shared experience, and I knew we would carry the weight of this encounter with us long after we left the forest. The turning point was not just about survival, it was about understanding our place within the natural world. The Apache National Forest had shown us that adventure comes with risks, and true exploration requires not just courage, but also respect for the mysteries that lie beyond our comprehension. As we prepared to face whatever awaited us in the daylight, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to approach the wilderness with reverence and an understanding of the stories it holds. As dawn broke over the Apache National Forest, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow over our campsite. The eerie shadows of the night before began to recede, but the weight of our terrifying experience still lingered heavily in the air. Clara and I sat close to the fire, both exhausted and shaken, grappling with the reality of what we had encountered. The forest, once a sanctuary for adventure, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, and the thrill of exploration had been replaced by a deep-seated fear. The immediate consequences of our late-night escapade were palpable. Clara and I exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the gravity of our situation. We had ventured too far into the unknown, and the danger we had felt was no longer abstract. It was a tangible presence that haunted our thoughts. The growl we had heard echoed in our minds, a constant reminder that we were not alone. The Apache National Forest, with its sprawling beauty, now felt hostile and unpredictable. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the forest in a golden light, we decided to break the silence. "We need to talk about what happened last night," Clara said, her voice steady but laced with concern. I nodded in agreement, knowing that we couldn't simply brush it aside. "You're right. We can't ignore it," I replied, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you think it was?" Clara asked, her eyes searching mine for answers. I hesitated, recalling the strange symbols we had seen around the fire. "I don't know, but it felt primal, like we stumbled into something sacred or forbidden," I said, feeling the weight of the words. "It's as if we were trespassing in a space that was not meant for us." Clara shivered at the thought, and I could see the fear reflected in her eyes. "Do you think we should leave?" "I mean right now," she asked, her voice tinged with urgency. The prospect of abandoning our plans felt daunting, but I understood her instinct. The thrill of adventure had been overshadowed by a clear and present danger. "Maybe we should," I replied, feeling a sense of responsibility for both of us. "We can always come back another time when we're better prepared." As we packed our gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that our experience had changed us. The act of retreating from the forest felt like an acknowledgement of our vulnerability. We were not invincible explorers. We were mere humans in the face of nature's mysteries. The Apache National Forest, with its beauty and peril, had humbled us in a way that would linger long after we left. When we finally made our way back to the main trail, the sun illuminated the path ahead, but the weight of the forest's secrets still hung in the air. With each step, I felt an increasing sense of urgency, as if the forest itself was aware of our departure. Clara walked beside me, her expression a mix of determination and fear. We had shared an experience that few could understand, and I knew that our bond had deepened as a result. As we neared the parking area, we encountered another group of hikers preparing to set out into the forest. They greeted us with cheerful enthusiasm, oblivious to the darkness that lurked just beyond the tree line. "You guys going for a hike?" one of them asked, grinning widely. I felt a pang of anxiety as I considered how to respond. Should I warn them? Should I share our experience, or let them discover the forest on their own terms? After a moment's hesitation, I decided to speak up. "Be careful out there," I said, my voice steady but firm. "We just came back from a hike, and it felt different. Just trust your instincts." The hikers exchanged glances, a flicker of concern crossing their faces. "What do you mean?" another one asked, curiosity piqued. I glanced at Clara, who nodded in agreement, and we shared the briefest of glances, an unspoken understanding passing between us. "We heard something strange last night," Clara added, her voice more confident than I expected. "It was unsettling. Just pay attention to your surroundings." The hikers nodded, their expressions shifting from excitement to caution. "Thanks for the heads up," one of them said, and I could see the uncertainty settling in. With a final wave, we continued on our way, leaving them to their adventure. I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. I had warned them, but I also knew that the thrill of exploration might ultimately outweigh their fears. As we reached my car, the weight of the forest began to lift, but its grip on my psyche remained. I started the engine, and as we pulled away from the entrance, I glanced back at the trees, their silhouettes stark against the brightening sky. The Apache National Forest would forever haunt my memories, a reminder of the thin line that separates adventure from danger. In the days that followed our harrowing experience, both Clara and I struggled to process the events of that night. The forest had revealed not only its secrets, but also our own vulnerabilities. I found myself reflecting on the nature of exploration and the respect it demands. Adventure, I realized, is not just about conquering the wild, but about understanding its power and the responsibility that comes with it. Clara, too, began to change. The carefree spirit she had embodied during our initial hikes seemed tempered by a newfound awareness of the forest's darker side. We spent hours discussing our fears and the lessons we had learned. "I think I need to approach nature differently now," she said one evening, her voice thoughtful. "I have to remember that it's not just a playground, it's a living, breathing entity with its own rules." Her words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of solidarity in our shared understanding. We were no longer just travelers seeking thrills. We were stewards of the wilderness, tasked with respecting its boundaries and recognizing our place within it. The consequences of our experience in the Apache National Forest would linger long after we returned to our everyday lives. We had faced the unknown and emerged changed, bound by a shared encounter that had forced us to confront our fears and vulnerabilities. The forest had taught us lessons that no guidebook could convey, and in that, we found a deeper appreciation for the wild landscapes we sought to explore. As I settled back into my routine, I carried the echoes of the forest within me, a reminder that adventure is as much about introspection as it is about exploration. I resolved to approach future journeys with a greater sense of respect and awareness, knowing that the wild holds both beauty and danger in equal measure. The Apache National Forest had left an indelible mark on my soul, shaping not only my perception of nature, but also my understanding of myself. In the weeks following our harrowing experience in the Apache National Forest, both Clara and I found ourselves grappling with the emotional aftermath of the adventure. While the physical scars from the hike had healed, The psychological impact of that night lingered like a shadow, prompting us both to reflect on our relationship with nature and with ourselves. What had initially been an escape into the wilderness had transformed into a journey of personal growth and understanding. Clara took the first step toward overcoming her fears. Inspired by our experience, she began to write about our adventure, channeling her emotions into words. "Writing helps me process what we went through," she explained one afternoon over coffee. "It's like I'm reclaiming the narrative. I don't want that night to define me." I admired her courage and began to see the power of storytelling as a means to confront one's fears. Her determination to transform a negative experience into something constructive was both inspiring and contagious. I decided to join her, documenting not just our adventure, but my own thoughts and feelings about what we had faced. As I wrote, I began to unpack my own emotions. The fear I had felt in the forest was a reflection of my deeper insecurities, my desire for validation, and the pressure I placed on myself to be a fearless adventurer. I realized that my motivations for exploring the wilderness had been somewhat misguided. It was not merely about conquering peaks or surviving in the wild. It was about connecting with nature and understanding its inherent beauty and danger. One evening, as I sat at my desk, the sunlight streaming through the window, I penned a letter to myself. In it, I vowed to approach future adventures with humility and respect. I recognized that the wilderness was not an adversary to be defeated, but a partner to be respected. This epiphany opened my eyes to the idea that true growth comes from learning and evolving, rather than merely surviving challenges. Clara also began to explore new ways to engage with nature. She signed up for a local wilderness survival course, eager to learn practical skills that would empower her in the outdoors. "I want to feel confident and knowledgeable, not just lucky," she explained with a smile. Watching her embrace this new challenge was exhilarating. She was reclaiming her sense of adventure, but this time with a focus on preparation and respect for the environment. I decided to join her in the course, eager to learn alongside her and strengthen our friendship. The experience proved to be transformative. We learned about navigation, foraging, and building shelters, but more importantly, we learned to work as a team, relying on each other's strengths and supporting one another through difficulties. The camaraderie we built during the course helped to reinforce the lessons we had learned in the Apache National Forest. That collaboration and trust are essential, not just in survival, but in all aspects of life. As we practiced our newfound skills, I began to feel a shift within myself. The fear that had once gripped me during that night in the forest was slowly being replaced by a sense of empowerment. I realized that facing my fears head-on was not about conquering them, but about understanding their roots and learning to navigate them. Each time I stepped into the wilderness, I felt stronger and more grounded, equipped with knowledge and a deeper appreciation for the natural world. The course culminated in a weekend camping trip in a nearby national forest, where we put our skills to the test. As we set up camp, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The forest felt different this time. It was no longer a source of anxiety, but a place of opportunity. I had learned to respect its beauty and its dangers, and I approached it with a renewed sense of wonder. During that trip, we faced challenges that tested our resolve. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in, bringing high winds and torrential rain. It would have been easy to panic, to succumb to the fear that had once paralyzed me, but instead, Clara and I sprang into action. We worked together to secure our tents and gather supplies, relying on the knowledge we had gained in our training. As we huddled under a makeshift shelter, sharing stories and laughter amidst the chaos, I realized how far we had come since that fateful night in the Apache National Forest. When the storm finally passed, the air was filled with the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth, and a vibrant rainbow arched across the sky. It was a moment of triumph, a reminder that beauty often follows adversity. Clara and I stood together, taking in the breathtaking view, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey we had undertaken. The fear that had once held us captive had transformed into a powerful catalyst for growth. As I continued to explore the wilderness in the months that followed, I carried the lessons I had learned with me. Each adventure became an opportunity for reflection and growth, a chance to engage with nature on a deeper level. I began to prioritize safety and preparation, but I also allowed myself to embrace the spontaneity and unpredictability that came with exploring the wild. Ultimately, my experience in the Apache National Forest reshaped my understanding of adventure. It was no longer just about conquering landscapes or seeking thrills. It was about forming connections, with nature, with others, and with myself. Clara and I had emerged from the darkness of that forest stronger and more resilient, bound by a shared experience that would forever influence our journeys. In the end, overcoming fear is not a destination, but a continuous journey. The challenges we face in the wild reflect those we confront in our everyday lives. The lessons learned amidst the towering trees and rugged terrain of the Apache National Forest will stay with me forever. A reminder that growth often comes from the most unexpected places, and that true adventure lies not in the absence of fear, but in the courage to face it. As the days passed following our transformative experience at the Apache National Forest, Clara and I found ourselves preparing for an adventure that felt both exhilarating and daunting. The lessons we had learned about respect, resilience, and teamwork echoed in our minds as we planned our next expedition, a multi-day hike in a different, yet equally mysterious wilderness area. This time, however, we were determined to approach it with the wisdom we had gained from our previous encounter. We spent hours poring over maps, discussing potential trails, and meticulously planning our route. Clara had become an adept navigator, her confidence bolstered by our wilderness survival course. "We should head to the Rim Trail. I've heard the views from the top are breathtaking," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I nodded, excited by the prospect of exploring new terrain while applying our newfound skills. In preparation, we made a checklist of essential gear, ensuring we were well equipped for any challenges we might face. We invested in high-quality tents, durable hiking boots, and reliable navigation tools. I could feel the excitement building as we gathered our supplies, but beneath that exhilaration lay a current of apprehension. The memory of our last adventure, the fear, the uncertainty, reminded me that nature can be unpredictable and unforgiving. As the departure date approached, we decided to have a final meeting at a local cafe, where we could review our plans and share a meal. Over steaming cups of coffee, Clara and I laid out our itinerary, discussing the trail conditions and potential obstacles we might encounter. "We have to be prepared for anything," I said, recalling the sudden storm that had tested our resolve on our previous trip. "We can't let our guard down." Clara nodded, her expression serious. "Agreed, but let's also remember to enjoy ourselves. We're here to connect with nature, not just survive it." Her words served as a reminder of the balance we needed to strike between caution and enjoyment. We had both learned that adventure was about more than just reaching a destination. It was about the journey itself. On the day of our departure, the excitement was palpable. We loaded our gear into my car, the trunk filled with provisions, maps, and camping equipment. As we drove toward our destination, the landscape shifted from urban sprawl to the rugged beauty of the wilderness, the towering trees and sweeping vistas beckoning us forward. The thrill of the unknown coursed through our veins, mingling with the echoes of our past experiences. Arriving at the trailhead, we took a moment to soak in the atmosphere. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the forest. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to embrace the lessons we had learned and to approach the wild with a sense of reverence. We strapped on our backpacks, feeling the weight of our gear settle comfortably against us, and set off down the trail. As we hiked, we found ourselves in a rhythm, our footsteps synchronized with the sounds of nature surrounding us. Birds chirped merrily, and the rustle of leaves accompanied our every move. The trail wound through dense thickets and across babbling brooks, offering glimpses of the beauty we had come to cherish. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a reassurance that we were ready to face whatever lay ahead. However, as we climbed higher into the mountains, the terrain became more challenging. Steeper inclines tested our endurance, and I could feel the burn in my legs. Clara, ever the optimist, encouraged me with her infectious energy. "Just a little further. The view will be worth it." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I pushed myself to keep going, motivated by the promise of what awaited us at the top. As we reached a particularly steep section of the trail, I noticed dark clouds gathering in the distance. The air shifted, and a cool breeze swept through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine. "Looks like a storm might be rolling in," I said, glancing at Clara. "Let's keep an eye on it," she replied, her tone steady but cautious. "If it gets too bad, we can find a place to wait it out." Her calm demeanor reassured me, and I felt a renewed sense of confidence in our ability to handle whatever challenges lay ahead. The final stretch to the summit proved to be the most demanding, both physically and mentally. The trail narrowed, and the rocky terrain required careful footing. As we climbed higher, the wind picked up, howling through the trees and threatening to steal our breath away. I tightened my grip on the straps of my backpack, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Finally, as we reached the summit, we were met with a breathtaking view that took my breath away. The expansive horizon stretched before us, a patchwork of forests, mountains, and valleys. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to our hard work and determination. Clara and I stood side by side, gazing out at the beauty of the world, sharing a sense of accomplishment that cemented our bond. But just as we began to celebrate our achievement, the dark clouds that had been gathering in the distance rolled in faster than we anticipated. A rumble of thunder echoed through the mountains, and the first drops of rain began to fall, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. Our moment of victory shifted into urgency as we scrambled to secure our gear and find shelter. "Let's head back down to the tree line," I shouted over the roar of the storm, adrenaline surging through me. Clara nodded, her expression resolute. We raced down the trail, the rain soaking us to the bone, but we moved with a sense of purpose and determination. The lessons from our previous experiences surged to the forefront of my mind. We were prepared, and we would face this challenge together. As we navigated the slippery terrain, I felt a surge of empowerment. The fear that had once gripped me in the Apache National Forest had transformed into a fierce determination to face whatever nature threw our way. With each step, I knew that we were ready, not just for the challenges of the wilderness, but for the uncertainties of life itself. We were explorers, not just of the earth, but of our own resilience and strength. The storm hit with a ferocity that took my breath away. As Clara and I descended from the summit, the once beautiful landscape morphed into a chaotic swirl of rain and wind. The trail, which had felt like a friend guiding us to the heights of our adventure, now transformed into a slick and treacherous path. Each step felt like a gamble as the ground shifted beneath our feet, and the roar of thunder seemed to echo our pounding hearts. "Stay close," I shouted over the howling wind, my voice barely carrying above the tempest. Clara nodded, her eyes wide but determined. The forest, which had welcomed us with open arms, now loomed ominously. The trees swayed violently, their branches reaching out like frantic hands, as if trying to warn us of the danger that lay ahead. We hurried down the trail, navigating the rocky terrain with a mix of urgency and caution. My heart raced not just from the exertion, but from a growing sense of dread. The storm had come out of nowhere, transforming our triumphant moment at the summit into a race against nature. The rain poured down, soaking us to the bone, and the visibility dwindled as the world around us blurred into a watery haze. Just as we reached a particularly steep section of the trail, the ground beneath Clara's feet gave way. "Clara!" I screamed, watching helplessly as she stumbled, her arms flailing as she tried to regain her balance. In an instant, she slipped, tumbling down the slope, her terrified scream piercing through the cacophony of the storm. Panic surged through me as I lunged forward, my instincts kicking in. "Hold on!" I shouted, my voice laced with desperation. I rushed down the slope after her, my heart pounding in my chest. The rain made the ground slippery, and I had to steady myself against the trees to avoid losing my footing. As I reached the spot where she had fallen, I found Clara sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath but miraculously uninjured. Relief washed over me for a fleeting moment, but it was quickly overshadowed by the urgency of our situation. "Are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside her as I scanned her for injuries. Clara nodded, though her face was pale, and I could see the shock in her eyes. "I think so," she managed to reply, her voice shaky. "But we need to get out of here." Her words snapped me back into focus. The storm was intensifying, and the trail was becoming increasingly hazardous. "We have to move now," I urged, helping her to her feet. We resumed our descent, adrenaline fueling our determination as we navigated the treacherous rocks and slippery mud. With every step, the trees around us creaked ominously, and the wind howled like a wild beast. I could feel the forest closing in around us, an entity that was both beautiful and terrifying. The sensation of being watched, which had haunted me during our previous adventure, resurfaced, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of urgency. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was testing us, pushing us to our limits. As we continued down the trail, I could hear the sound of rushing water growing louder. The rain had transformed the streams into torrents, and I knew that crossing them would be dangerous. "We need to find higher ground," I shouted, glancing at Clara. She nodded, her determination evident even through her fear. Just as we rounded a bend, we came upon a small creek that had overflowed its banks. The water surged violently, and I could see debris swirling in the current. "We can't cross there. We need to find another way," I yelled, trying to remain calm as panic threatened to take hold of me. But Clara's eyes were wide with fear as she pointed upstream. "Look," she shouted. "There's a fallen tree. We can use it to cross." I followed her gaze and saw a large log spanning the creek, partially submerged in the rushing water. It looked precarious, but it was our only option. "Okay, we can do this," I said, my voice steadying as we approached the log. "Just take it slow." Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on the log as she took a deep breath. I went first, carefully placing one foot in front of the other, feeling the log sway beneath me. The sound of the raging water beneath was deafening, but I focused on maintaining my balance. Halfway across, I glanced back to check on Clara. She was following closely behind, her expression resolute. "You got this," I encouraged her, but as she stepped onto the log, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the trees, causing the log to shift dangerously. Clara's foot slipped, and I watched in horror as she began to lose her balance. "Clara!" I yelled, reaching out to her. In that split second, a surge of instinct propelled me forward. I lunged for her just as she grasped the side of the log, her eyes wide with panic. I managed to grab her arm, pulling her toward me with all my strength. "Hold on!" I shouted, my heart racing as I felt the log teetering beneath us. With a final push, I pulled Clara to safety, and we tumbled onto solid ground, breathless and shaken. We lay there for a moment, the storm raging around us, but we were alive. The rush of adrenaline faded, leaving behind a profound sense of relief and gratitude. We had faced the storm, the forest, and our own fears, and we had come out the other side together. As we stood up, soaked and trembling, we exchanged a look that spoke volumes. We were no longer just two adventurers seeking thrills. We were survivors, bonded by the trials we had faced. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice steady. "We can't let the storm win." With renewed determination, we pressed on, navigating the forest with a newfound respect for its power. The storm would not break us. Instead, it would shape us into the adventurers we were always meant to be. Together, we would embrace the wild, acknowledging both its beauty and its dangers as we ventured deeper into the heart of the Apache National Forest. As we finally emerged from the Apache National Forest, the storm behind us and the sun breaking through the clouds ahead, I felt a profound sense of transformation within myself. The journey had begun as a simple escape into nature, but it had morphed into a crucible of challenges that tested not only our physical limits, but also our emotional resilience. Clara and I had faced the wildness of the forest, the ferocity of the storm, and our own fears, and in doing so, we had discovered something invaluable about ourselves. The lessons learned on that tumultuous adventure would resonate long after we returned to our everyday lives. We had learned to respect nature not just for its beauty, but for its unpredictable power. The forest had taught us that true adventure lies not merely in conquering landscapes, but in embracing the journey, with all its highs and lows. Each moment, whether filled with terror or awe, contributed to our growth as individuals and as friends. In the weeks following our return, Clara and I found ourselves reflecting on our experience frequently. It spurred us to engage more deeply with the outdoors. We sought not just to hike, but to learn about the ecosystems we traversed, the histories of the lands we explored, and the cultures of the people who had lived there long before us. Our adventures became about connecting with each other, with nature, and with ourselves. Moreover, the experience ignited a passion for sharing our stories. We began to organize community events, encouraging others to explore the outdoors while emphasizing the importance of safety and respect for nature. We wanted to ensure that others could enjoy the wilderness without falling prey to the same fears and dangers we had faced. Our story became a catalyst for conversations about environmental stewardship, adventure, and mental resilience. As I reflect on that harrowing experience in the Apache National Forest, I realize it was not just a chapter in my life, it was a turning point. It shaped my perspective on exploration and deepened my appreciation for the natural world. I emerged from that forest not just as an adventurer, but as a storyteller, a keeper of the lessons learned in the wild. Months later, Clara and I sat together in a cozy cafe, surrounded by the warmth of friends and laughter. We shared our stories, recounting our adventures and the lessons we had learned in the Apache National Forest. The experience had brought us closer, and we both knew that we would carry those memories with us for a lifetime. As we planned our next adventure, we embraced the uncertainty and excitement that awaited us, knowing that every journey would continue to shape us in profound ways. If you're inspired by our journey into the wild, I encourage you to embark on your own adventure. Explore the beauty of nature, but remember to do so with respect and awareness. Educate yourself about the places you visit, embrace the challenges, and share your experiences with others. Together, let's foster a community of passionate explorers who cherish the great outdoors and advocate for its preservation. Adventure awaits. Go out and find it.